The Brewhouse was created to capture and share with you the long history of the Genesee Brewery. But the brewery itself isn't half as interesting as the beer and the people who make it. Visit GeneseeBrewhouse.com. Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Rochester Press Box, presented by the Genesee Brewhouse. Glad to have you with us. I'm Bill Pucko. Happy to be joined by our Rookie of the Day, Matt Trabold, City Basketball Love. You work for PickandSplinters.com. You shoot video as a photojournalist for Channel 13. Basketball savant.
I'll even take Idiot Savant. It's kind of like the tuxedo T-shirt of the human world. I'll even take that.
Well, we'll make a judgment on that at the end of the show, all right? Matt, good to have you co-hosting here. Nate Rowan, thank you very much.
Thanks for having me, Bill.
Rochester Red Wings front office. And Pat Duffy is back. Pat, what do you got on?
Nathan Beaulieu game-worn jersey from earlier this season. It's got the 100 years patch, which I'm a big fan of, and it's also got a hole in it, which I didn't notice till after I bought it. So I got that going for me.
Well, that increases the value of a game-worn jersey.
It would increase the value if it was anybody but Nate Beaulieu.
Very good. Well, look, we're going to talk basketball first. I want to make the statement first. This whole NCAA thing to start. From where I'm sitting, this is a great opportunity for basketball. More than anything else, it's an opportunity. How do you see it?
So the NCAA FBI situation, I have a bad taste in my mouth about it because I think there's a lot more things in this country that can be addressed by the FBI than college basketball. And I know a lot of it is because of these archaic rules in the NCAA and the fact that dinners and small amounts of money involving college players are a big deal. But that's what that Yahoo report, a lot of it was. It was dinners. And a lot of times you think of FBI, you're thinking of big-time criminals. Chili's Riblet should not be getting you in trouble and against
At
people.
least in that way.
Yes, against people that are legitimately on the FBI most watch list. It's a little ridiculous that the FBI is dealing with this, and I think they had a pretty sloppy job on top of it in terms of the findings.
Wow.
Yeah. Hope I don't get any watch lists now myself.
Oh, no, but it's sort of like baseball. It's with the steroids issue, and the same thing was said about Congress. It's what are they bothering? But for the sport, and you know, this little circle that we kind of exist in, for the sport, it was a good thing because it got things done. And I think that's why this is an opportunity.
I just get worried because the NCAA seemingly has unlimited power, and they never seem to take the fall for any of this. This is something I believe personally, I think a lot of people think, is like rampant across the sport. It's just not a lot of people are being caught in this. I mean, LeBron even came out and said, if I had gone to college, somebody would have needed to pay me an incredible amount of money to go to college. I think, especially for the high-profile recruits, people are talking to them in these terms. This is happening under the watch of the NCAA, and they never seem to take the fall for any of it. And that's really concerning because it's happening more and more across the sport. At least we're finding out about it more and more across the sport. Yet the NCAA nothing seems to happen with the NCAA.
Listen, I'm with both of them. I agree that the FBI should be doing more than looking into college basketball. But it is the NCAA's fault, and you're right. They never get caught on that stuff. And the argument is always from these schools, well, we can't pay these kids because our athletic department is barely breaking even. But nobody talks about the actual money that the NCAA makes. You know what? Your fight, schools in the NCAA, isn't with the kids. It's with the money that the NCAA is making. And why is that not filtering down to these programs where they're breaking even? I don't believe that they're just breaking even. There's ways to cook the books to lose money, right? Forrest Gump, that movie from 1994, still officially hasn't made a dime since it was released, the way things are cooked. I look at it this way. Amateurism is dead. Pure capitalism says that if you're good at something, you're going to find a way to make money for it. And these kids are so good at basketball. These coaches depend on them. These coaches' careers and their assistants and their future depends on them. There's nothing you can do to stop it. So just end this idea that amateurism exists and pay these kids to play sports, for goodness sake.
So 5 years down the road, what's this all look like? Does the NCAA exist?
I think it does, but it might need to have a change at the top because Mark Emmert came out with a very tame, not taking any blame for anything after that Yahoo report came out, and that's just not leadership if you ask me. So the one and done rule will probably get switched to maybe a none and done or a two and done. And that's what you're seeing all these big amounts of money, like a DeAndre Ayton, $100,000, because there's such a small window these kids are going to be in college. And if they're really good, you want to grasp that because that puts people in the seats.
Well, to your point, do it like basketball or hockey does it, where you can be drafted, you make a 2-year commitment, and then you're done, right? I don't see the problem with a kid having an agent if you know that his rights are owned by somebody else. Yeah. There's no issue in that.
And in baseball, if you go to a 4-year university, you have to be in college for 3 years before you're eligible to be drafted again. Now, kids get around it by going to a junior college. Bryce Harper did it right out of high school. But, a way where you're going to say, all right, we're going to commit to this program for so many years. A kid sometimes can be misguided, but if he wants to leave right out of high school and not go to college, I'm not sure why we're trying to prevent them from doing so. It could be a foolish decision if they don't surround themselves with the right people. But at the end of the day, if the kid wants to go to the NBA, let him go to the NBA.
Yeah, that system works. I mean, I can't remember the last time I heard anyone complain about the system baseball has managed to put into place.
Or even football. I like staying longer. 3 years, I like that.
This is the Rochester Press Box, presented by the Genesee Brewhouse, the Buffalo Bills. Are next. The Press Box, brought to you in part by Connors & Ferris, your workers' comp attorneys. Call 262-COMP, C-O-M-P, today. Welcome back to the Rochester Press Box, presented by the Genesee Brewhouse. Time to talk Buffalo Bills, brought to you by Connors & Ferris. Pat, I have a confession to make. Never watched as a second of the Combine. Does that
really?
make me a bad sports fan?
Yes, that makes you a terrible sports fan. The Combine is one of my favorite things to watch in sports, right? Because you're watching literally millions of dollars coming down to fractions of seconds, and guys that you never heard of before making themselves a ton of money, and guys that were locks to make a ton of money making a terrible, terrible mistake. What's more entertaining than that? It's like watching this show on a weekly basis. Terrible, terrible mistakes.
A regular, no less.
So I went to Penn State, and obviously football school. I'm a basketball guy, but football school. The Combine is huge. And then, Saquon Barkley this time around. But just so interesting because you really whittle down a big money-making sport into skills. Like, everyone can run. It's just a matter of seeing how fast they can run.
I would get it if it was the first time they'd seen any of these guys, but they've been
pro
studying
days.
them for 2 and 3 years.
Yeah, so you have that along with it. And even with Sam Darnold not throwing this year, it's still so interesting because there's so much access to these guys. Yes, they're not in pads, but you see them catching passes, which is a big deal, I think, because a lot of times guys are getting open and they have to catch open passes. So I think it's just so very interesting.
You see, my least favorite part about the Combine is you have all of these anonymous scouts who just rip the players that are, on the field or whatever. I would love for a player to just come out and rip some random scout from the Indianapolis Colts. But, it's like none of these scouts put their names to this stuff. But all this stuff comes out like, oh, this guy's into this guy's into this guy can't do that. And it's just like, it's my least favorite part of it because these guys are trying to make a living and you got these scouts crapping all over them.
It's like, and then 3 years from now, Dan Patrick gets a hold of those scouting reports, and when he invites him in as his guest, he said, here's what they were saying about you 3 years ago.
Exactly.
What do you make of the Vontae Davis signing?
I don't understand it, to be completely honest with you. No, it doesn't necessarily mean the Bills won't be re-signing E.J. Gaines, but it sure as heck looks like they're going to go with Davis instead of Gaines. I don't know. I don't care how great your system is. You can't flip a corner every year for 3 years and have your defense be consistently good because Darby out, E.J. Gaines in. Vontae Davis signs a 1-year deal, which means there will probably be somebody else back there or they're drafting someone this year. And Vontae Davis's problem is the same problem that E.J. Gaines has, and it's staying on the field. I mean, Vontae Davis was released in November. Yeah. Nobody signed him. I want to trust the process, and I guess there's enough sweat equity with what McDermott and Bean have done where I could say, okay, but I don't think I like this signing.
Well, that's what I get. I mean, can a guy that's available like he was prior to free agency, off the street, walk into a starting job?
I know E.J. Gaines, he only played, 11 games last season, but he was a Pro Football Focus darling during that time. He's a good player. He's younger. And just the fact that, Vontae Davis, I know I'm probably an isolated case, but I remember him most for like a Hard Knocks moment where he wanted to call his grandma after not getting cut, but getting traded. So at this point in his career, he's not a Pro Bowl player anymore. Like you said, he got released.
Well, I mean,
it's not a good sign.
In the defense of the GMs and stuff over there in Buffalo, E.J. Gaines was a nobody before he came here, too. He was a guy with promise who had underachieved, and he found that achievement in Buffalo, and he's going to get paid this year. So, Vontae Davis could be that guy. If he can play, fine. It's just, if he can't stay on the field, it doesn't matter how well he recovers or how great the system is. It doesn't work.
The steal of the pre-free agent season, right?
Yeah, well, I mean, McDermott and the Bills really turned. They had a couple guys in the positions at the beginning of last year, and people didn't really know how they were going to work out. I guess I'm willing to at least see how it plays out before I rush to judgment. But I would say there is some concern with a guy that was cut and every other team just let him stay on the free agent market while teams were in desperate need of defensive backs last year.
Yeah, circle March 14th. That's the date where the start of the legitimate free agent season and the chaos that's involved with that. This is the Rochester Press Box presented by the Genesee Brewhouse, and this portion was brought to you by Connors and Ferris. Like It or Not is next. Here's the Press Box trivia question brought to you by Market View Liquor, where exceptional customer service meets an extensive selection. Jefferson Road at 390. Here's the Press Box trivia answer brought to you by Market View Liquor, where exceptional customer service meets an extensive selection. Jefferson Road at 390. Welcome back to the Rochester Press Box presented by the Genesee Brewhouse. Like it or not, hey, the Minnesota Twins look like they're taking themselves seriously this year.
Yeah, I think more teams in Major League Baseball should take them seriously. They were one of the wild card teams last year and ultimately lost to a better New York Yankees team in the wild card game. They are sensing that the Central is a little bit weak. Detroit is not going to be very good. Chicago, White Sox are not going to be very good. Kansas City, we'll see what happens there. But they're taking a look at the market and realizing that there's an opportunity to sign guys for some good value. Logan Morrison is the most recent signing there. They made a good trade with Tampa Bay to get Jake Odorizzi. The biggest question mark last year was their pitching. They're going to score some runs this year. We'll see how good their pitching can improve. But Irvin Santana is going to miss the first month with a finger issue.
They're bringing new guys. That's good for Rochester.
Heck yeah, it is. And if you want to see a good pitching staff, come out to see Rochester. There's a lot of good young pitchers in the system right now. So that should mean for some low-scoring games in Rochester, which means some quick baseball games. And that's ultimately what fans are all concerned about now.
Yeah, especially the guys that are working up at the press. Right? Pat, like it or not, NHL trade deadline deals.
I am so done with the NHL trade deadline. I loved it. And even this year I got all excited. I was tweeting in all caps, and I skipped my nap that I take after the break room on CMF. And in the salary cap era, the NHL trade deadline is dead. It's over. There's no exciting things anymore. Than the Sabres. I want to talk more about what happened with Evander Kane in my final to go here. But yeah, I don't know. It was a holiday back in the day. Today, it's not what it used to be, just because you can't exchange money on anything but expiring contracts towards the end of the season anymore. I don't like it. It makes me sad.
You know, these trade deadlines, sports right across, it seems like they're like maximizing the impact of these things. But maybe the NHL did fall short this year.
Remember, when I was in school, I think it was elementary school, I was so into the NBA trade deadline. I think it was during a break one year, and I was watching the coverage on ESPN all day. Now they do like maybe an hour, a 2-hour show, because I think across the board, it's not as emphasized anymore, and I think that's kind of maybe not a missed opportunity money making, but at least a popularity.
Well, let's put it this way. The Bills made a bigger splash on NHL trade deadline day than the Sabres did. The Bills signed Vontae Davis, right? Sabres fans were all disappointed, and the Bills show up with this thing. Oh, okay, everything's good now. Different sport, it's fine. God, I hate the deadline now.
Matt, like it or not, the The NFL proposed rule changes.
Pass catching, that is a huge deal because a lot of times this past season and in a couple seasons recently, that was the big deal. It's so glaring when, as a naked eye, as a sports fan, you're seeing what looks like a catch and it's not called a catch. So that targeting, I know that's being proposed as well. That's a college thing. It's kind of tough, even though a lot of deals deal with that.
That's the one I love.
Yeah, a lot of deals deal with that in terms of especially a Gronkowski, Tre'Davious White. But I don't know if it'll get passed. I don't know if it'll definitely work out because these are guys making money. These are game checks being fiddled with a little bit here. And I like the fact that pass interference may be being contained to 15 yards because this spot of foul situation where a pretty routine infraction can be 40, 50 yards for an offense, I think that's a little much. I really like that rule change as well.
Despite seemingly the ignoring of the pass catching rule for so long, obviously the one thing the NFL has always been is proactive towards trying to keep their sports understandable. Yeah. Except for that one. Listen to the Rochester Press Box presented by the Genesee Brewhouse. Unfinished Business is next.
Here is the MVP Experience Stat of the Week, brought to you by Sport Clips, where it's good to be a guy. No appointment ever needed.
Dunkin' iced coffees are $2 from 2 to 6 p.m. That's right, all sizes, all freshly brewed, all with that signature smooth Dunkin' taste. Power up with a Dunkin' iced coffee for $2. America runs on Dunkin'.
Welcome back to the Rochester Press Box presented by the Genesee Brewhouse. Unfinished Business brought to you by Dunkin' Donuts. America runs on Dunkin'. Pat.
A lot of Sabres fans are upset with general manager Jason Botterill for what he got back in the Evander Kane deal in Buffalo. Evander Kane is an amazing talent that may be coming into his prime at age 27 years old. But there's things that go around it. The Sabres got back essentially what's going to be a second-round pick, a prospect, and a fourth-round pick. For a guy that's been accused of a sexual assault and assaulting another woman and was run out of another locker room in Winnipeg and has story after story of even in Buffalo things that happened behind the scenes that weren't illegal that affected inside the locker room. He got in a fist fight this season with one of his teammates in practice and didn't address it for a couple of days. The word is out on Evander Kane. The guy's a pariah. There's no reason why you shouldn't have gotten a first-round pick for him other than the fact that he has massive, heavy baggage. Jason Botterill didn't trade for him. That was GMTM, Tim Murray, who did it before. Tim Murray shouldn't have traded for him in the first place because he gave up a couple of first-round picks and some prospects and Tyler Myers to do so. This ain't Botterill's fault. This is Tim Murray's fault. And before you start lighting him up, tell me why this generational player was third on the team in points on the second worst team in the NHL. He's not what you think he is, and it's not Botterill's fault what happened.
How much heat has Botterill taken for this season so far, do you think?
It's not just, the trade deadline is the worst. It's not just what happened with Evander Kane, the fact that there were other guys with expiring contracts that didn't move, but I think this Kane deal overtook everything because he felt the pressure of having to get something for him, and it becomes a second-round pick, a prospect, and a fourth-rounder. Next year's his first full year, everything all together. Let's see what you do then.
Matt?
I'm going to stick with basketball. So, in terms of college, retire the RPI. It's been de-emphasized by the committee reportedly for each of the last 3 seasons increasingly. If you're going to go with metrics instead of the eye test, I think you have to stick with the ESPN BPI because one of the things that goes into it is the RPI and then KenPom. Right now, you look at it and the RPI has maybe 1 out of 10 teams at the top. It's just ridiculous. It's teams with no at-large opportunities. Louisiana Lafayette, Ragin' Cajuns right now are 35. They have no at-large chance. And granted, if they make it out of the Sun Belt, I might pick them to win a first-round game. But that just shows that's just one little microcosm of the problem right now. Bruce Rasmussen, who is the committee chairman this year, came out recently in a newspaper article, and he said that Quadrant 1, Quadrant 2 wins is a big metric being used right now for the NCAA Tournament 2018. He went along the lines of saying, not all those wins are created equal because they're based on the RPI. The RPI, away with it.
I'm glad somebody understands all those terms. I feel better. I will sleep better knowing that somebody gets all this stuff. Thanks, Matt.
I love the Olympics. I watched the hockey, both the men's and women's, every game that United States played, most of the other games during the men, including the gold medal game, which is an incredible game between Germany and the Olympic athletes of Russia, which is absurd that they weren't called Russians during that tournament. Anyway, the women won the gold medal despite last year boycotting, or at least threatening to boycott, the 2017 World Championships. They wanted equality. They wanted to be paid similar to what the men are being paid on the other side. The women risked everything so that they could have a better future for their sport and the women in United States hockey. They won, and they backed it up. And not a lot of people can back it up. So props to the women. They risked their entire careers, the Olympic careers and world careers, and they came out on top, and it's really refreshing because they definitely deserve it. They put a lot on the line.
Thank you, Nate. This portion of the Rochester Press Box is brought to you by Dunkin' Donuts. America runs on Dunkin'. Matt, nice to have you.
Thanks for having me on. It was
Guys,
beautiful.
Nate, Pat, as always.
Thanks, Bill.
Thank you for joining us. We'll see you next week with the Rochester Press Box.